Hi Jen, hi Ed. I hope both of you are doing fine. This video is an attempt to give you an overview of the website that I've created, Appraise. Also wanted to introduce you to the different elements of the site, the various available functionalities, the basic, and map them kind of to the intentions and the purpose that we started out with, so that it is easier for you to hopefully connect to the smaller videos that I'm creating for the rubrics and tying it all together. And hopefully the blog post will also help you understand a little bit more, and when you get to use the site, or if you have time, I'm hoping you'll be able to go through these functionalities and suggest some more changes if you'd like. It would be lovely to get some user feedback. Okay, here we go. So just to start with what we were trying to solve, this was a business challenge at work. We are trying to make sure that the applications that are being maintained or created in the organization are compliant to the certain standards that are being set by the risk management team. So there are a lot of questions that are decided as a part of these compliance standards. Every application manager is supposed to respond to these questions in terms of with respect to the application that they are dealing with. The risk management team or the central governing team would collect all these questions and the responses, and they would finally analyze if the application is compliant or not. So they've been sending out these surveys, which are not exactly the most efficient method. They're doing it through a SharePoint site. So I wanted to look into a new solution which could help them do this in a much more efficient way, and also provide some kind of a configuration flexibility, so that they didn't have to change around a lot when they wanted to add in standards, or maybe add a standard and make it applicable to more than just one application. Basically a user-friendly approach for the admin and the manager and a generic user as well. So this picture basically explains everything that I just said, specific to every question, how we deal with knowing if an app is compliant or not, and the steps that the manager would take to make sure that it is compliant. All this happens within a due date that is set for the survey. Most of these terms that I've used will make a reappearance on the forms that I've created in the website, so you will get to see all of them again. Before I move on to the demo, I just wanted to give you a brief overview about the various big or major components, as I call them. These are the major, if I were to literally speak in relational database terms, these are the tables that are the most important one. They are also the basis for my schema, if you may call that, for this non-relational database. So this is the users, or people who are registering, people who are going to be using the website itself. They have roles assigned to them. They can be an admin, they can be a manager, or they can be a generic user. The application is basically the application data, anything that is related to the details of an application. Categories and status values are sections that you can tag the application to. These are again configurable. You can categorize applications into different sections. For example, you could have 8 .NET applications and 13 Java applications or so, where .NET and Java would be categories. Status values are compliance status values. Right now I've kept it very simple: green, amber and red, based on the generic statuses. But suppose we do decide to add a few more in the future, you can continue to add them. You can define what you call as a compliance status, and you can apply it to your application. There is the standardized questions, which is coming from the risk management team. These are based on all the standards. They could apply to categories of applications. For example, a .NET application is supposed to have so-and-so version. A Java application is supposed to have had this patch updated. These questions apply to all Java applications, and anything with a Java category should show up this question in the survey. The last piece is the survey. The survey actually pulls in data from almost all sections that you can see here, except all of them are shown as a profile almost for the survey section. There are some pieces that can be editable by the managers. There are some pieces that are editable by the admins. the users can just see the survey. Survey is almost what I would define as a Facebook page where all the information on your profile has been pulled out from different apps. As I've just spoken, the different users are the admins, the managers, and the generic user. I have also a proper persona identification for this, and you might probably see that in the personas that I've posted on the site. Joshua Parker is the admin that I'm using. He's the person who would act as an admin for me. Sondra Link is an example of an application owner. Terry Lane, the user. Just to give you a picture of how they look so that you have an idea of what we are heading for here. Okay. Now for the demo. So this is the site. I'm using the local host at the moment. I'm not trying to use the site that has been hosted. It's just a little bit faster here for me to explain. So here we go. So this is the home screen where you get to start with a register or a login. The assumption here is that the user has to be a part of the site to be able to do anything here. So they would have to register if they haven't registered. And once they are registered, they are assigned roles. That's something the admin can do. You'll probably see me doing it right now. So going back to the login information, these are the general login information details that I have passed on in one of the blog posts as well, in case you'd like to test the app. So I'll just go ahead and use one. I'll use the admin. We can start with the admin, or we can start with a new user as well. So let me try and do that. Let me register for a new user. Let me register for myself. Okay, so some pieces of this information got auto-updated because it's my Chrome. So I'll just call this my username. And all right, so now I'm registered, which means that I have provided some details and I'm using a certain bit of authentication in the background process. I hash the password. The storage of the password is happening through a lot of series of codes and hashes, and the final password is not actually visible even when you pull it out. I'm using local storage to authenticate here, and all of this is happening in JavaScript because I'm dealing with a mean stack and all of it is a JavaScript framework. So we'll use the same password to log in, and here we are at the dashboard page. Now I am a generic user. That's how I've set the access levels to be. Anybody who is registering newly would always be provided the user role by default. Any changes to the role would have to be completed by the admin. We do not have generic rights to go in and make any changes. The general user cannot do much. They can only view data. They can of course get to their own profile, and you can see that the role is assigned as a user here because I just created a new profile. I can search for things if needed. Maybe I know an application name. So let me just pick a random application name that I have added in already. I was testing this, and so the test data does definitely have a lot of the test database does have a lot of details already in it. So I'm just pulling up a few records for you to have a look. So this is pulled up something, the app name. I searched by the app name and I added in a new keyword, so anything with new would show up here. I provide details about application profiles. I provide details about application surveys. I can also get to see the categories that are in use at the moment. And these are all the categories that I have. These are the ones that can be added in by the admin only. They can choose to add in more groupings here. Technically, the logic here would be that any application could be tied to this category, and so they could be grouped together when you're doing this. The other piece would be the status values that I referred to, the compliance status values. Right now, most of the applications here in the test data are red, green, or amber depending on the calculation of the status. You can choose to add in more status values as you want to define them, and hopefully in case you want to enhance or add a little bit more of logic around calculation of statuses for the compliance, you would be able to do it very easily in the future. Not a difficult issue. These are the surveys that are being created for every application. There's not much that the user can see at the moment because they are not managers, they don't have rights to edit anything, and since they are not admins, they definitely cannot edit anything about the app as well, and they also cannot see a lot of details. They would just be looking at the general list of surveys that are present here. This is the checklist questions. These are the questions that are associated with the standards. So I'm hoping that the risk management team provides this question to the admin, or somebody from the admin would add in this question. They get to select a category with the question. They are supposed to tag it to a category, and this could be multi-select. You can tag one question to more than one category, and I have made sure that if an application has any of these multi-select categories mentioned together, these questions are not repeated. For instance, if I have an application which has both Java and Tridian, this particular question would appear only once there because it's just needed to be responded to once. So these are all sections that you will see when I switch to another login. So before we just move on to the next login or role, I would just cover one section, which is the user section. Here is where you can see all the listed users of this database. There's not much of information that is being provided other than the fact that you can see an email address. If you would like to contact them, you can use this email address and send an email to them, hoping that they are a part of the organization. This is something I considered allowable or permissible. If this needs to be hidden or so, it's not a very difficult detail to put in. You can just add a mail to and send the mail directly instead of showing them an email address. I have also shown the roles that are assigned to them. Again, this is something that I'm assuming at the moment is permissible and harmless in this case because you're a logged in user, so you are allowed to see the roles. There's not much you can do again here. You can just see them. Now I go back to I'll just log out of this profile. I will try to log in as a manager, and I'll use one of these authentication username and passwords. I'll use Sondra because Sondra is somebody who is my persona as well. So I'll just use her details. I know it by heart now, but if you'd like, you can just refer to this cheat sheet and get the details. Here we go. So Sondra is an application manager. She has certain applications associated with her. Whatever applications are associated with her, she can find it directly on her dashboard page, her landing page. She has her list of applications here along with the status, the most recent status. And if she were to click on find surveys, she would be taken to the list of surveys that are currently present. This would just list out all the surveys irrespective of the ones that are active or not. She would see the edit survey button only if the survey is active, and that depends on the due date that is assigned. So this is 30th May, so she still has time to go in, make changes to the responses, make sure it is compliant. This is something we can try. At this moment, you can see it's an amber status, which means that it's not yet completely compliant, maybe because there was something pending from her end. So you can just go in and edit the survey. As you can see, this is a response form, answer this survey, simple, lots of sections here, lots of pieces of information about the application is not editable. This is not something Sondra can control. It's only the admin who can control this. And the status is amber here. A little bit of information on how it is being calculated, just in case Sondra is curious. What we are trying to do here is a very simple logic, and I've kept it very basic. There are a number of questions that are showcased here based on the category that is selected. You can see the category here is just a .NET application, so any question that is a part of the .NET group would show up here. Now, if this question is present here and Sondra responds to it with a yes or no. Based on that, we calculate how many positive answers she has provided and we try to slot it into red, amber or green. The number of questions and the number of positive responses. This is the way I'm trying to calculate it. I've kept it pretty simple here. This is ideally not a real life situation. In a real life scenario, you would have a lot more different types of questions and you would also have different answers. But again, I'm assuming any time you have a question, you have different types of answers, you might want to rate it, and that is a piece that I'll work on as an enhancement. It's simple to add 2 or 3 more properties to this question where you can clearly specify what your response would be, what kind of a score you would like to assign to it, and based on the scores that are finally calculated, you end up slotting them in different compliance status groups. For instance, if it is a 6 and it comes up, maybe you want to call it in the red zone and not in the amber zone. Just an example there. So here she has a lot of questions which are answered as yes, but she does still have 3 or 4 no's here. So I'm just going to switch to probably yes in this case. You could also try switching it to no, it will just go into the red zone. So based on the calculations that I have here, now I just have one question that is no. So I'm just going to submit this and it is going to take me back to my dashboard, and now you can see that this piece is green. The active contacts is green. You can try to get back here and check. This is the active contact. We just edited this survey and it's green now. So getting back to the dashboard, the second piece of the dashboard is the survey section. Again, this shows up all the surveys that are present for Sondra as an application owner. The edit button, however, shows up only for those that are still within the due date. Anything that has crossed the due date, she cannot edit any longer till the admin chooses to create another survey and send it out to her with a new due date. This application is stuck with the status that it has. So for example, it is in red now, she cannot do anything about it. It will remain in red till the admin actually creates a new survey for her and she gets to respond. So this is something in a real life situation is considered as an escalation. People would like to know why your application is in red, why you didn't do anything even though you were provided a due date, why you didn't fix it or so. The intent here is to highlight all such applications and apply rules for the application manager to be able to get things done in time. So getting back to the dashboard section, again, Sondra can do everything that a user can do. She can search for other applications, and it need not show up with, it would not basically show up with any edit icon or so because she doesn't own them. It's all generic information for her. This is owned by Gene Smith, so Sondra can't do much about it. She can choose to view other surveys. She can also choose to see different users present in the application. She can also see all the checklist questions. There is not much that she can do there in these sections because these are all specific to the admin. Not much of role is provided to the application manager. The only thing that the manager can actually change is the responses. They cannot change anything specific to their application either. They would have to reach out to an admin to do this. So now that we have covered the manager role, we will try to go into the admin now. Admin is pretty powerful as far as the site is concerned. It was designed that way. I'm just picking up the credentials for the admin here. You can see more credentials. I have my own persona as well, Joshua Parker. He's the admin here. I'll just use the second one. That's something I've been using pretty much. So let's just go in and log in here. Okay, so we are again back to the dashboard page, and as you can see, I am an admin, but I don't have any ownerships. It could be a situation where I could own data as well. I mean, I could own applications and that would show up here. But in this case, this user doesn't have any ownership. So nothing is showing up here. So it shows up an error message, which basically an informational message, which shows no application data found or no surveys found. The admin can search. The admin can do almost everything that you just saw. But this time, they can also add things in. So Let me just try this. Actually, let's try searching by the app ID now. So if I were not to be entering details here, if I were to be just searching in by general, it would show up every profile here for me, which basically doesn't have a search key at all, so it would show up all profiles associated. So we have everything associated, all the surveys that I've created, everything is present here. As you can see now, I can delete apps, I can edit apps. Let's just try doing this one. Just a random example. Now you see that certain things can't be edited here, certain things can't be modified. They can't be modified because the application ID is something we have no control over. Once it is created, you might tag it to a survey already, and you'll see how I'm going to create a new survey, and you'll see how the application ID is linked to the survey. Before changing the application ID, there is a certain amount of caution required, and this particular piece has been added in as a caution to make sure that you do not randomly go in and change application IDs, because you would leave a lot of surveys hanging in the air basically, because the application ID has changed now. So that was a check there implemented. You can choose multiple categories again for the application. You can choose to change the application owner. The status you can choose to set here, but again, the moment the owner starts answering the survey, the final status is always going to be the calculated response survey status from the surveys that has been answered. So it is just going to override your value. Doesn't matter what you would like to tag in here. You could go in and put a green, but if the survey is still red, it's still going to show up as red. So let me just select something and make a change here. You're back here, and you can see that the .NET and SharePoint is selected. You can choose to delete things as well. Let me check for a record which I can delete here. I can just go ahead and delete this, and that record is gone. These are the basic CRUD, create, read, update, delete functionalities that you can see on every page. It is very effective here because it's an admin role. All kind of functionalities is available to this role. Going back to the dashboard or any other page, if you were to click on this, now you get to see all the surveys that are listed out here. Now what you can do to the survey once you've created it is, you can just delete it. You cannot edit a survey, you cannot modify responses within a survey. Now that piece is exclusively meant only for the application manager. Once you have created a survey as an admin, you cannot change the responses of the survey. You cannot change anything as far as the survey is concerned. You can, however, delete it. So if you want to make a change, you might want to actually roll out a new survey and delete the older one. So that's the only way I've kept it at the moment. This is something we can work on in the future as an enhancement, try to deal with different changes that you would like to make to a survey as an admin. The idea here is to make the manager aware that this survey has changed. Your responses may or may not apply. You might want to go in and have a look. This is something that has to come up as a process, maybe as an email or some kind of a trigger. We need to think a little bit more about this section. At the moment, I've kept it very plain and simple that you just cannot change anything as an admin to a survey that's already active or that's already been created. So if we were to go ahead and create a new application survey, the first thing that you see here is to select an app ID. Now this is something you get to select from an existing list of apps. I am hoping the admin is aware of the app ID or is provided the app ID. All they have to do is select. If they don't find it, they might want to add one, which is again a very simple process. They go in and add in the details, they select the categories, they add in the owner, they can choose a status and submit and create the application and then come back. So let's just try that. So what happens if you select an application ID that is already existing? Let's try that. I'm going to type in something that's already existing. And you'll probably see an error. I'm just going to assign this to Sondra because she's my favorite manager. There you go. So you got an error message which says the app already exists and cannot be duplicated. So you cannot use the same application ID for two applications. You'll have to change it. So that's something that has been treated as a message from the non-relational database. This took me a while to configure, but it seems to show up perfectly well now. This is something I wanted to keep as a constraint because the most important piece of this website is the app ID. It connects everything together. In relational terms, I would have called it a primary key, but I'm not using the relational term here now because it's not a relational database. So it took me a while to configure it this way. But now we just select, I'm just going to call it something nice so that you can also spot it. And I'm going to go ahead and just select a few multiple categories so that you can see how it works. I'm going to still keep Sandra as the owner. I'm going to submit this. Now you get an error, a message here which clearly specifies it's been added. If you scroll down, you should be able to see the app as well. Now again, when I go back into editing the app, I still cannot edit the ID. That's not something that can be edited. And if I go back here, I have this app. Now I'm just going to go ahead and try and create a survey for this app. That's something akin to, we call it rolling out a survey actually. So trying to create an active survey for the app. So let's try and do that. So now it says I have various other options, as you can see right now. Because I'm an admin, I can see a lot more things. So if I were to just go and click on add a new survey, give it a few seconds. There you go. So again, the first thing that I get to do is choose an application ID, which I'm going to just select the one that we just now created. What was that? 2GNT, I think that's what we created. So you see that a lot of information is being pulled in, something which I cannot edit even as a admin at the moment. So it's going to be solidified here. If I want to change anything, I might want to go back into the application, find the application, make a change there. On the survey, I can't make a change towards the application details. Now, based on the category, you can see a lot of questions have been populated here. All these were associated with various categories like Angular, Java, and Oracle. Maybe we could test that too now that we are in the question checklist field. So before we create a survey, let's just take a step back and try and add a question to one of these categories. So I'm just going to add one to Angular. So again, if I click on survey details, I see checklist questions where I can view all of them. I can add a question. So I'm just going to add a question to Angular. I'll just put it as, what's this? Upgraded to the this is just a random question, just to make sure that this is something that appears on the survey, just to show you how it all ties in together on that one big form. So was this upgraded to the latest version of Express? And I'm just going to tag it to the Angular one, and I'm going to submit it. Now I can see that if I were to scroll down, here is my question. I can choose to edit the question or delete it. I still have time to do that. Before I create the survey, I can make changes to the questions. Now getting back to my add a survey page. And I'm going to go in and select the exact same app ID that I created. And here you go. You have Angular, Java, and Oracle selected here. And the status is what I had selected earlier. Now let me just see if I can find my new question. And there it is. It was this upgraded to the latest version of Express? This was a question that was not there earlier, but now I did add it in as a part of the Angular category, and there it is. So I can see all the questions updated here. And I need to set a due date that's required. If I did not, I would have probably got an error message right on top in red. You can test that out. It's pretty clear. I'll just set a future date here so that we can look at it in terms of being editable. Sandra is the only person who can edit it, and she gets time till 22nd June to make that change. And then I go ahead and submit this. So now I have a new survey here for Sondra for the 21st of June, and I can only choose to delete it now. I cannot do much here. This is the piece where everything comes together. Survey has been one of the biggest forms in this in this site, because it depends on the number of questions that are tagged to each category. So in that sense, this is a very good example of a dynamic form. This was my intent when I started creating this site, to be able to configure the questions at a different place and get all of it together based on a category, so that if there is a change in the governing policies, it is not an impact to how surveys are being created. You just have to go ahead, add a question, make a change to an existing question, and the next time you create a survey for that app, if it belongs to that category, it would show you the changes. So you're not having any problems in terms of impact here. You are not having to go and make changes to the field names. Of course, you can make a change to the field type, but that is again a piece that we will have to work on. Here there has been a very simple assumption that it would be a yes or a no answer, so it is always going to show up as a yes or a no drop down. But of course, we can set all those pieces as well. The idea here was to show that it is something we can control and create a survey without impacting the form's structure itself. So everything is being generated, the HTML is being generated in the background. So once this piece is done, we have the user section left. Now what we just saw was that a person can register their details. So they had to fill in a username, a password, their name, and also an email address. What did happen was that when the user is registered into the application, they are always registered in a general role, which is the user's role. Now if we want to change the role, the admin is somebody who can do that. So if I were to go into the users section, you can see here that the admin can see the email, the user, and the role. So when it comes to editing a role, that is the only piece of information that the admin can change about the user. They cannot see their password, they cannot see their username or any other information that they have stored in. They cannot access it through the backend as well, because I've used hash keys and so forth. I've used something called AuthGuard. It's a part of the packages that Node offers, and Node and Express offer together. They cannot see the password in the backend, which makes it extremely secure. The only thing that they can change is the role. So let me just go in and change. For example, Joshua Parker, he should be an admin here. I have left him as an example here so that we could change his role during the demo. So I'm going to just do that. I'm going to go in and edit his role and change him into an admin. I could choose manager, I could choose user, I could choose admin. So I'm just going to go for admin here. Now Joshua is an admin. There he is. You can also delete the user. Suppose you decide that the user has left the organization. This is something that automatically happens had this been coming from an Active Directory. But since I am simulating it, I have used a Mongo database collection to update this. So you can just delete the user as well. So this is the user section. And again, I can go back to the dashboard. I can have a look at my details here. I can also do a lot of searching. So if I were to just look at .NET here as a category, you get all the apps that are a part of the .NET. You also get the details here where you can go in and edit things. A lot of actions are available to the admin, so the admin page looks a little bit more fuller and more populated than the other roles, I guess. So this is something that you can try and test out. You can see if things are dynamically changing, things are getting updated. Status is something that gets updated quickly. The updates happen pretty fast. I have not had any problems yet. So that's something very positive, and the change almost instantly shows up in your status the moment you update a survey or so. So this is a generic overview of the Appraise website that I've created. Now all of these might also, some of these features might also repeat in the rubrics, more so because I'm trying to align them together so that they make a lot more sense. Code wise, this piece of structure, I'm just pulling up my Sublime text to show you what is exactly happening in the background. So these are all a lot of components that I have created. I initially started out with 4 or 5, but then eventually I broke it down into different components so that it could make a very clear structure visible to me and make life easier for me when I was working on it. So this is where my application is stored, and there are pieces of components here everywhere that you can see. All this has been coded in TypeScript because Express is something that works on TypeScript. It automatically converts the TypeScript to JavaScript. So I was typing it in the TypeScript language. So these are the forms that you can see. This piece is the form piece. I'm sorry if everything looks a bit too long. I'll reduce it. This is the form piece, which is basically the user interface that you get to see. This is the services piece, where I have tried to split up different things like updating applications or adding applications, adding surveys or so. All the functionalities are attached to these smaller services that you can see here. And finally, you have the piece where you are showcasing the models. The models are the different structures or schemas that are possible in a non-relational database. What I can do here is I can control the object. For instance, I can tell you what all I would like to see in a user object. That is how I am actually controlling the schema there, because Mongo database as such is pretty flexible. It doesn't require any kind of settings to be done before we start. So this is my way of adding some structure to the Mongo database or the non-relational database. Can you override it? Yes. Can you also add something new? Yes, it can be done. But again, a little bit of impact analysis is required, especially because you may be impacting data that is already existing if you don't write the correct query. You may end up overwriting a lot more details. You might end up blanking out what is already present for one specific entry if you don't know how to target the correct field or the new field that you're trying to add in. So you can see all of these elements or components that I showed you. Each of them have their own models. And this model is directly being applied to the Mongo database just to give you a flexible structure, give you some kind of method in the chaos. So that was the intent here. And finally, there is this piece which we call routing, which is very, very important for the mean stack. Every specific functionality that I write, every service that I create requires a routing tied to the URL. So it could be some 18 or 20 URLs. I need to tie it in with the service so that I can call it correctly and make the application react to the Mongo database and vice versa. So that is how everything functions. So these are different pieces. Again, I'm hoping you don't find this whole big video overwhelming. I'll try to repeat pieces of this in my rubrics as well. So thank you for listening to me, and hopefully you will get to see me again in the rubric section. Thank you. Bye-bye.